Widowed and starving, Margaret stood alone at the forest's edge with her children huddled close. The wagon train had vanished without them, said she was too slow, too much of a burden. No fire, no food, just a ragged blanket and the weight of her children's fear. She walked through the wilderness, every step weaker than the last. Then, from the trees, an Apache hunter emerged, silent, steady, and staring straight at her. She thought they'd been left to die, but fate had one more chapter to write. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe if you believe that help can come from the most unexpected places. Margaret stood at the edge of the camp, watching as the group of pioneers disappeared into the distance. Her heart felt heavy, but she knew she needed to stay strong. Her 3 children, James, Lucy, and little Sam, huddled close to her. Their eyes were wide with fear and confusion. The decision to leave them behind came suddenly. The leader, Mr. Thompson, said they could not slow down for her any longer. The group saw Margaret and her children as a burden. They had few supplies left, and the journey ahead was difficult. Margaret tried to plead with them, but her words fell on deaf ears. The sun was setting, and the cold wind began to bite. Margaret wrapped her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders. The wilderness around them felt vast and unforgiving. She looked down at her children. James, the eldest at 10, tried to put on a brave face. Lucy, only 8, clung to her mother's skirt, her eyes filled with tears. Sam, just 5, did not fully understand what was happening. He looked up at his mother, trusting her completely. Margaret knew they needed to find shelter before darkness fell. She spotted a small cluster of trees nearby that might offer some protection from the wind. "Come on, children," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. They walked slowly, the children following closely behind. The ground was uneven, filled with rocks and roots that seemed to reach out to trip them. When they reached the trees, Margaret set about making a small camp. She spread out the thin blanket they had and placed her children on it. She rummaged through the small bag of supplies they had been left with. There was a little bread, some dried meat, and a few apples. It would not last long, but it was all they had. Margaret gave each child a small piece of bread and a slice of apple. She saved the dried meat for later, knowing they would need it more when the hunger became worse. As night fell, the temperature dropped further. Margaret held her children close, trying to keep them warm. The thin blanket offered little protection against the biting cold. She could feel James shivering beside her, and she pulled him closer. Lucy had fallen asleep, her head resting on her mother's lap. Sam nestled in Margaret's arms, breathing softly. The night was long and filled with sounds that made Margaret's heart race. The howls of distant wolves echoed through the night, and the rustling of leaves seemed to signal unseen dangers. Every sound made her grip her children tighter. But she knew she had to stay calm. Panic would not help them. As the first light of dawn broke, Margaret felt a renewed sense of determination. She looked at her sleeping children and knew she had to keep them safe. The wilderness was harsh, but she could not give up. Margaret gently woke the children, giving them another small piece of bread. They ate quickly, their eyes still heavy with sleep. Margaret knew they needed to move. Staying in one place was too dangerous. She decided to follow the path the pioneers had taken, hoping it might lead them to safety or at least to a place where they could find help. The journey was slow. The rough terrain and the children's tired legs made progress difficult. But Margaret kept them moving, encouraging them with gentle words. The sun rose higher, and the chill of the night gave way to a crisp, cold day. Margaret tried to focus on the journey ahead, but her mind kept drifting to the past. She thought of her late husband, who had been a strong and kind man. He would have known what to do, but she was alone now, and she had to be both mother and father to her children. Hours passed, and the children grew tired and hungry. Margaret stopped to let them rest, giving them the last of the dried meat. She knew she needed to find food soon. The wilderness offered little, but she hoped to find something, perhaps berries or small game. The landscape around them was vast and empty. The trees were sparse, and the ground was covered in dry, brittle grass. Margaret scanned the area, looking for any signs of food or water. As they rested, she noticed James staring at something in the distance. "What is it, James?" she asked, her voice gentle. James pointed silently, and Margaret followed his gaze. In the distance, she saw a small rabbit. Its ears perked up as it nibbled on the grass. Margaret's heart leapt. If she could catch it, they would have food for the night. Margaret moved slowly, trying not to startle the rabbit. She picked up a rock, its surface cool and smooth in her hand. Her heart pounded in her chest as she crept closer. The rabbit continued to nibble, unaware of her presence. With a quick prayer for luck, Margaret threw the rock. It missed, and the rabbit darted away, disappearing into the brush. Margaret sighed, disappointment washing over her. But she couldn't let it show. She turned back to her children, forcing a smile. "It's okay," she said, her voice steady. "We'll find something else." James nodded, his eyes filled with admiration for his mother. He believed in her, and that belief gave Margaret strength. As they continued their journey, the sun began to dip in the sky. Margaret knew they needed to find shelter before nightfall. She scanned the horizon, looking for anything that might provide safety. In the distance, she saw a small cave nestled at the base of a hill. It was their best hope, and she led the children toward it. The cave was small but offered protection from the wind and the cold. Margaret guided her children inside, spreading their thin blanket on the ground. The walls of the cave were cool and damp, but they were safe for the moment. As darkness fell, Margaret gathered her children close. They had no food, but they had each other. Margaret lay awake long after her children had fallen asleep. She listened to their soft breathing, feeling a deep sense of responsibility. She was their protector, their provider, and she would not fail them. She closed her eyes, willing herself to rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she was ready to face them. With the first light of dawn, Margaret woke, her determination renewed. She gently roused her children, and they set out once more. The wilderness was vast and unforgiving, but Margaret refused to give up. She would find a way to keep her family safe. As they walked, she held on to hope, knowing that somewhere, there was a place for them. Margaret and her children continued their journey through the wilderness. Each step was a struggle, but Margaret knew they had no choice. The path was unclear, and the land was harsh. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, and the cold wind cut through their thin clothes. Margaret kept moving, driven by the need to protect her children. As the sun rose higher, the day grew warmer. The ground was uneven and rocky, and Margaret had to be careful. She held Sam's hand tightly, guiding him over the rough terrain. James and Lucy walked beside her, their faces set with determination. They were tired, but they trusted their mother. Margaret drew strength from their faith in her. The forest around them was silent, except for the occasional rustle of leaves. Margaret's eyes scanned the trees, searching for food. She knew they could not survive long without it. Her mind raced with possibilities. She had seen berries on bushes before, but she didn't know if they were safe to eat. And though she had tried to catch the rabbit, it had escaped. Margaret stopped and knelt, examining a bush with small red berries. The berries looked tempting, but she hesitated. She needed to be sure they were safe. She remembered her husband teaching her about some berries that were edible. She picked a few, examining them closely. After a moment's thought, she decided to try one. She tasted the berry, its sweetness surprising her. It seemed safe. Margaret gathered more, calling her children over. "These should be okay," she said, offering them the berries. The children ate eagerly, their spirits lifting with the small meal. Margaret smiled, relieved to see them a little happier. But the joy was short-lived. As they continued their journey, the sky darkened with clouds. A storm was approaching, and they had no shelter. Margaret felt a knot of fear in her stomach. She had to find a place for them to stay dry and safe. They quickened their pace, urgency driving them forward. The wind picked up and rain began to fall. It started as a drizzle but quickly turned into a downpour. Margaret's clothes were soon soaked, and the children shivered beside her. She spotted a large tree with thick branches and led the children underneath. It provided some cover, but they were still wet and cold. Margaret hugged her children close, trying to keep them warm. The storm raged around them, lightning flashing in the sky. Thunder rumbled, and the rain poured down in sheets. Margaret whispered words of comfort, though her heart was filled with worry. She needed to stay strong for her children. The storm eventually passed, leaving the forest dripping and quiet. The ground was muddy and slippery, making the journey even harder. Margaret knew they couldn't stay under the tree much longer. They needed to keep moving to find a better place for the night. As they walked, Margaret's mind was filled with thoughts of their situation. She felt the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. She was all her children had, and she couldn't let them down. She had to find a way to keep them safe and fed. The day stretched on, and the children's energy began to fade. Margaret's own strength was waning, but she couldn't stop. She encouraged James and Lucy to sing a song, hoping it would lift their spirits. Their voices, though tired, filled the air with a small sense of hope. The sun was setting when they stumbled upon a small stream. Margaret's heart leapt. Water was essential, and they hadn't had a proper drink in hours. She led the children to the stream, and they drank deeply, grateful for the fresh, cool water. Margaret washed her face, letting the cold water refresh her. Margaret knew they needed to stay near the water, but the ground was too wet to sleep on. She searched for a dry spot, eventually finding a patch of grass under a group of trees. It wasn't perfect, but it would have to do. She spread the blanket on the driest part and sat down, pulling her children close. As night fell, the forest came alive with sounds. The distant call of an owl, the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. Margaret listened, her senses alert. She knew they were not alone in the wild, but she hoped the animals would keep their distance. The children fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the day's journey. Margaret stayed awake, her mind racing with plans for the next day. She knew they needed food and shelter. She thought of the berries and wondered if they might find more. Her thoughts drifted to the pioneers who had left them. She felt a pang of anger but pushed it aside. Anger would not help them now. Margaret closed her eyes, letting herself rest for a moment. She dreamed of a warm home, a fire crackling in the hearth, and her children laughing and playing. It was a comforting dream, one that gave her strength to face the next day. When morning came, Margaret woke with renewed determination. She gently shook her children awake, and they ate the last of the berries. The sun was shining, and the day promised to be clear. Margaret decided they would follow the stream, hoping it might lead to a settlement or a farm. The journey was slow, but the children were in better spirits after their rest. They walked along the edge of the stream, the sound of water a constant companion. Margaret kept her eyes open for any signs of food or shelter. The forest seemed endless, but she held on to hope. As they walked, Margaret thought about what she would do if they found help. She would work, do anything necessary to keep her children safe. She knew she had strength inside her, strength she hadn't realized she had before this journey began. The day wore on and the children began to tire. Margaret encouraged them, telling stories of brave explorers and adventurers. She painted pictures of lands filled with food and warmth. Her stories made the children smile, and they pressed on, their small feet moving steadily. Afternoon turned to evening, and Margaret knew they needed to stop soon. She searched for a place to rest, eventually finding a small clearing. It was near the stream, and the ground was dry. She spread out the blanket, and the children lay down, their eyes heavy with sleep. Margaret sat for a while, watching her children as they drifted off. She felt a deep sense of love for them, a fierce desire to protect and nurture them. She was their mother, their guardian, and she would do whatever it took to keep them safe. As the stars appeared in the sky, Margaret lay down beside her children. She felt the cool night air on her face and listened to the gentle flow of the stream. She knew the journey was far from over, but she felt a flicker of hope. Margaret closed her eyes, holding onto the belief that they would find a way. Together they would survive. The morning sun peeked through the trees, waking Margaret gently. Her children were still asleep, their faces peaceful in the early light. She smiled, feeling a small moment of peace, but she knew they needed to keep moving. They had followed the stream for 2 days now, and though it provided water, they still needed food. Margaret gathered her courage and woke the children. They ate the few remaining berries, and Margaret promised they would find more food soon. She hoped her words would come true. They set out again, following the stream as it wound through the forest. The day was warm, and the sun filtered through the leaves, making patterns on the ground. Margaret felt a sense of purpose as they walked. She was determined to find help. Her children trusted her, and she would not let them down. As they walked, Margaret noticed something unusual. The forest was quiet, but she felt a presence nearby. Her heart quickened, and she stopped, listening closely. James looked at her, sensing her unease. "What is it, Mother?" he asked softly. Margaret shook her head, unsure. She scanned the trees, looking for any sign of danger. Then, she saw him. A man stood a short distance away, partially hidden by the trees. He was watching them, his expression calm but cautious. Margaret's heart pounded. She didn't know if this man was friend or foe. She held her children close, unsure of what to do. The man stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate. He was tall and strong, dressed in clothes that blended with the forest. His eyes were dark and intelligent, and he held a bow, though it was not drawn. Margaret met his gaze, trying to show no fear. She knew they needed help, but she had to be careful. The man stopped a few paces away, studying them closely. Margaret felt the tension in the air, but she also sensed something else. There was no threat in his eyes, only curiosity. The man spoke, his voice calm and steady. Margaret didn't understand the words, but his tone was not harsh. He gestured to the forest around them, then to the sky. Margaret realized he was asking if they were lost. Margaret nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. She pointed to her children, then to her mouth, hoping he would understand they needed food. The man watched them for a moment longer, then nodded. He gestured for them to follow him, turning back into the forest. Margaret hesitated. She didn't know if she could trust him, but they had little choice. The wilderness was unforgiving, and they needed help. She took a deep breath and led her children after the man. Her heart filled with hope and fear. The man moved quickly, but he made sure they could keep up. He led them through the forest with ease, as if he knew every tree and rock. Margaret watched him, her mind filled with questions. Who was he? Why was he helping them? After a time, they reached a small clearing. A simple camp was set up with a fire pit and a few supplies. Margaret felt a wave of relief. It was not much, but it was more than they had. The man gestured for them to sit by the fire pit, then began to prepare a meal. Margaret watched him work, her curiosity growing. He moved with quiet confidence, gathering wood and starting a fire. Soon, the smell of cooking filled the air, making Margaret's stomach rumble. The man handed them food, a simple stew that was warm and filling. Margaret smiled her thanks, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. The children ate eagerly, their spirits lifting with each bite. Margaret felt a warmth spread through her, a hope that maybe they would be okay. After they ate, the man spoke again, his voice gentle and curious. Margaret didn't understand his words, but she sensed he wanted to know their story. She pointed to herself, saying her name slowly. Margaret. The man nodded, understanding. He pointed to himself and said, Naiche. Margaret smiled, feeling a connection forming. She pointed to her children, saying their names. James, Lucy, Sam. Naiche nodded, his eyes kind. Margaret tried to explain their situation with simple gestures. She pointed to the forest, then mimed walking and being left behind. Naiche watched, his expression thoughtful. He seemed to understand the basics of their plight. As the sun set, Naiche showed them a place to sleep. It was a tent made from branches and leaves, simple but sturdy. Margaret felt a sense of safety she hadn't felt in days. She tucked her children in, feeling a deep gratitude for Naiche's kindness. Margaret lay awake for a while, listening to the sounds of the forest, the crackle of the fire, the rustle of leaves. She felt a sense of peace, knowing they were not alone. Naiche's presence was comforting, and she felt a growing trust in him. The next morning, Naiche showed them around the small camp. He taught them how to gather food, pointing out which plants were safe to eat. Margaret watched closely, eager to learn. She felt a sense of empowerment, knowing she was gaining skills to help her children survive. The children were fascinated by Naiche. He showed them how to track animals, his movements swift and sure. James followed him eagerly, his young mind soaking up the knowledge. Lucy and Sam watched with wide eyes, their faces filled with wonder. Margaret felt a sense of hope growing inside her. Naiche was teaching them how to survive, and she felt stronger with each new skill she learned. She knew they still had a long way to go, but they were no longer alone. As the days passed, Margaret and her children settled into the routine of the camp. They worked alongside Naiche, gathering food and learning the ways of the forest. Margaret felt a growing bond with Naiche, a mutual respect and understanding. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Naiche gestured to the stars above. He spoke softly, telling stories of his people. Margaret didn't understand the words, but she felt the emotion behind them. The stories were filled with history and tradition, a culture rich and deep. Margaret shared her own stories, using gestures and simple words. She spoke of her past, of the journey that had brought them here. Naiche listened, his expression thoughtful and kind. Margaret felt a connection with him, a sense of being understood. As the night wore on, Margaret felt a growing sense of gratitude for Naiche's presence in their lives. He had given them hope and safety, a chance to survive and thrive. Margaret knew they still had challenges ahead, but she felt ready to face them. Margaret lay down beside her children, feeling the warmth of the fire and the comfort of Naiche's camp. She closed her eyes, her heart filled with hope for the future. Together with Naiche, they were finding a new path, one filled with possibility and promise. Margaret and her children had been living with Naiche for several weeks now. Each day brought new lessons and discoveries. Margaret felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. The forest no longer felt like a vast, frightening place. Thanks to Naiche, it had become a home filled with life and opportunity. Naiche was patient and skilled, showing them how to live in harmony with the land. He taught Margaret how to set small traps for rabbits and other creatures. She learned to recognize which plants were good for eating and which were not. The children watched with wide eyes, eager to learn. James, in particular, was fascinated by the tracking skills Naiche demonstrated. He followed Naiche closely, watching how he read the signs on the ground. Naiche showed him how to find animal tracks, pointing out the subtle differences between them. James practiced diligently, his young mind soaking up every detail. Lucy and Sam were captivated by the stories Naiche told. He spoke of the stars, explaining the constellations and their meanings. Though Margaret didn't understand every word, she felt the importance of these stories. They were part of a rich tradition, connecting them to the world around them. Margaret felt a growing respect for Naiche's culture. His way of life was deeply connected to nature. Everything had a purpose, and nothing was wasted. Margaret began to see the beauty in this simplicity. It was a stark contrast to the life she had known before, where things were often complicated and rushed. One day, Naiche took them to a nearby hill. The climb was steep, but the view from the top was worth it. The forest stretched out before them, a sea of green and gold in the sunlight. Margaret felt a sense of awe. She realized how small they were in this vast world, yet connected to it in every way. Naiche pointed to different landmarks, explaining their significance. Margaret listened, feeling a deeper connection to the land. She understood now why Naiche lived as he did, in tune with nature and its rhythms. It was a way of life that respected the earth and all its inhabitants. As the days passed, Margaret and her children became more comfortable in their new surroundings. They adjusted to the routines of gathering food and preparing meals. The skills they learned not only helped them survive, but also gave them confidence and independence. The children thrived under Naiche's guidance. James became adept at setting traps and tracking animals. Lucy learned to identify plants and herbs, understanding their uses. Even young Sam, with his endless curiosity, absorbed the knowledge around him. Margaret felt a sense of pride watching her children grow. They were becoming strong and capable, learning to face challenges with resilience. Margaret herself felt stronger, more self-assured. She realized she had found a new purpose here, a new life for her family. Naiche was a constant presence, guiding and teaching them. Though language was sometimes a barrier, they found ways to communicate. Simple words and gestures conveyed meaning, and over time, they developed a mutual understanding. Margaret valued his wisdom and kindness. One evening, as they sat around the fire, Naiche shared a special tradition. He brought out a small pouch filled with colored sand. With careful hands, he began to create a design on the ground, a sand painting. Margaret watched, captivated by the intricate patterns. Naiche explained, using gestures and words, that the painting was a form of prayer, a way to connect with the spiritual world. Margaret felt honored to witness this tradition. She sensed the deep respect Naiche had for the world around him, a respect that was woven into every aspect of his life. Margaret decided to share something from her own past. She gathered the children and began to sing a lullaby her mother had sung to her. The melody was soft and gentle, filling the air with a sense of warmth. Naiche listened, his eyes soft with understanding. This exchange of cultures brought them closer together. Margaret felt a bond forming, one rooted in shared experiences and mutual respect. She realized that despite their different backgrounds, they had much in common. They were all seeking a life of peace and purpose. As the days turned into weeks, Margaret and her children became woven into the fabric of Naiche's life. They worked together, shared stories, and faced challenges as a team. The forest, once a place of fear, had become a sanctuary, a place where they could thrive. Margaret often reflected on their journey. She thought of the hardships they had faced and the uncertainty that had followed them. But now she felt a sense of hope. She knew they had found a new path, one filled with promise and possibility. One afternoon, as they sat by the stream, Margaret felt a wave of gratitude. She looked at her children, their faces alight with joy as they played in the water. She looked at Naiche, who was teaching James how to fish with a simple spear. Her heart swelled with thanks for the life they had found. Margaret realized she had learned so much more than survival skills. She had learned about resilience, about trusting in others, and about the power of community. She had discovered that even in the face of adversity, there was always a way forward. The forest had become their teacher, and Naiche their guide. Margaret knew they still had challenges ahead, but she felt ready to face them. She had found strength in herself and in the people who had become her family. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the land, Margaret felt a sense of peace. She knew they were where they were meant to be. Together, they had found a new home, a place where they could build a future filled with hope and love. Margaret felt a change in the air. The days had grown cooler, and the leaves turned shades of orange and gold. The forest was preparing for winter, and so were they. The camp bustled with activity as they gathered supplies and prepared for the colder months. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Naiche approached Margaret. His expression was serious but kind. He gestured for her to sit by the fire, and she sensed he had something important to discuss. The children played nearby, their laughter a comforting background. Naiche began to speak, using simple words and gestures. He explained that winter would be hard, and safety was important. Margaret listened, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. She understood the challenges they would face, but she also felt a growing sense of determination. Naiche paused, and Margaret saw a different emotion in his eyes. He spoke again, this time with a question. He was proposing something that involved her and her children. Margaret's heart skipped a beat as she realized what he was asking. Naiche was proposing a union, a partnership that would ensure their safety and well-being. Margaret felt a rush of emotions. She had grown to trust and respect Naiche. He had shown her kindness and had taught her family so much. But this decision was not easy. Margaret's mind raced. She thought of her children, of the life they had built here. She weighed the risks and benefits, her heart and mind in conflict. She knew her children had grown fond of Naiche. He had become a part of their lives, a figure of strength and guidance. That night, Margaret lay awake, her thoughts swirling. She thought of her late husband, of the life they had shared. She missed him deeply, but she knew he would want her to find happiness. She considered the future of the security Naiche's proposal could bring. The next day, Margaret watched Naiche as he worked. He moved with ease and confidence, his connection to the land clear in every action. Margaret felt a sense of admiration for him, for the life he led and the values he held dear. As the sun set, painting the sky with hues of pink and purple, Margaret made her decision. She approached Naiche, her heart steady but filled with emotion. She nodded, accepting his proposal. Naiche's eyes lit up with understanding and gratitude. The children sensed the change, their eyes curious and bright. Margaret gathered them close, explaining in simple words what this meant for their family. James, Lucy, and Sam listened, their young minds processing the news. Margaret saw the trust and excitement in their eyes, and her heart swelled with love. In the days that followed, preparations were made to mark their new union. It was a simple ceremony, reflecting the values of both their cultures. Margaret felt a sense of peace, knowing they were creating a new family, a new beginning. The day of the ceremony dawned bright and clear. The forest seemed to celebrate with them, the air filled with the scent of pine and earth. Margaret dressed in a simple garment, her heart filled with a sense of purpose. Naiche wore a traditional outfit, symbols of his heritage woven into the fabric. The ceremony was intimate, just them and the children. Naiche and Margaret exchanged tokens of commitment, simple but meaningful. Margaret felt a warmth spread through her, a sense of belonging and hope. She looked at Naiche, her partner in this new journey, and felt a deep connection. The children watched, their faces alight with joy. They sensed the importance of the moment, the start of a new chapter in their lives. Margaret felt grateful for their acceptance and love. Together, they stood as a family, ready to face the future. As the ceremony concluded, they shared a simple meal. The forest provided the backdrop, its beauty a reminder of the life they had chosen. Margaret felt a sense of gratitude for the path they had taken, for the challenges that had brought them here. In the days that followed, Margaret settled into her new role. She worked alongside Naiche, learning more about his culture and customs. She felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing she was contributing to their shared life. The community accepted her, and she began to find her place among them. Margaret and Naiche faced challenges, as all families do, but they faced them together, their bond growing stronger with each test. Margaret felt a sense of resilience she hadn't known before. She had discovered a strength within herself, a strength that was nurtured by love and partnership. The children continued to thrive, their laughter a constant source of joy. They learned from both Margaret and Naiche, absorbing the best of both worlds. Margaret watched them grow, feeling a deep sense of pride and hope for their future. As the seasons changed, Margaret reflected on her journey. She thought of the struggles and the fear, the uncertainty that had once filled her days. But now, she felt a sense of peace and purpose. She had found love and family, a place where she belonged. Margaret knew there would be more challenges, more lessons to learn. But she felt ready, her heart filled with confidence and hope. Together with Naiche and her children, she looked to the future with optimism. They had created a life rich with love and meaning, a life she was grateful for every day. Margaret woke to the sounds of birds singing. The sun was rising, casting a warm glow over the camp. She lay still for a moment, savoring the peace of the morning. Her thoughts turned to her new life with Naiche, and a sense of gratitude filled her heart. The air was crisp, and the forest was alive with activity. Margaret could hear the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of animals. She rose quietly so as not to wake the children, who were still asleep. Naiche was already up, tending to the fire. He nodded to her, a silent greeting, and she smiled in return. Margaret had found her place in the community. She worked alongside Naiche, contributing to their shared life. The people welcomed her and the children, offering friendship and support. Though there were challenges in adjusting to this new life, Margaret embraced them with determination. She spent her days learning new skills. Naiche taught her how to make tools from the materials around them. She learned to weave baskets and craft simple garments. Margaret found joy in these tasks, knowing they were building a life together. The children adapted quickly, their laughter a constant presence. James had become quite skilled at tracking, following in Naiche's footsteps. Lucy enjoyed gathering herbs and learning their uses. Sam, with his boundless energy, explored every corner of the forest, always returning with stories of his adventures. Margaret noticed how the community worked together, supporting one another. There was a sense of unity and cooperation that she found comforting. She joined the women in preparing meals and caring for the young ones. They shared stories, and Margaret felt a sense of belonging. The women taught Margaret about their customs and traditions. She learned about the importance of the seasons, the cycles of the land, and how they influenced their lives. Margaret listened eagerly, her respect for their way of life growing deeper with each lesson. One day, as they gathered around the fire, an elder shared a story. She spoke of the past, of the challenges their people had faced. Margaret listened, absorbing the wisdom and strength in her words. She felt a connection to these women, a bond that transcended words. Margaret decided to share a piece of her own culture. She told them about the holidays she had celebrated as a child, describing the traditions and foods. The women listened with interest, asking questions and nodding in understanding. Margaret felt a sense of pride in sharing her past, bridging the gap between her old life and her new one. As the days passed, Margaret felt her confidence grow. She had found a rhythm in her new life, a balance between work and family. She felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing she was contributing to their community. Margaret and Naiche worked together, their partnership one of mutual respect and understanding. They faced challenges side by side, solving problems and making decisions together. Margaret valued Naiche's wisdom and strength, and she knew he valued her insights and courage. Their bond deepened with each passing day. They shared quiet moments, sitting by the fire or walking through the forest. Margaret felt a sense of peace in Naiche's presence, a comfort she had not known since her husband's passing. One evening, as they watched the sunset, Margaret spoke of her hopes for the future. She talked about her dreams for the children, her wish for them to grow strong and happy. Naiche listened, his hand resting gently on hers. Margaret knew they shared the same hopes, the same dreams. As the seasons changed, the community prepared for the colder months. Margaret helped with the preparations, gathering supplies and ensuring they had enough to see them through the winter. The work was hard, but it was fulfilling. Margaret felt a sense of accomplishment as they completed their tasks. The community worked together, each person contributing to their collective well-being. Margaret marveled at the strength and resilience of these people, their ability to face challenges with grace and determination. The children thrived in this environment. They learned from the land and from the people around them. Margaret watched them grow, filled with pride and love. She knew they were learning important lessons that would guide them throughout their lives. The winter months arrived, bringing with them a chill in the air. The community huddled together for warmth, sharing stories and laughter. Margaret felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life they had built, for the family they had become. Margaret often reflected on her journey, on the path that had led her here. She thought of the struggles and fears, the uncertainty that had once filled her days. But now, she felt a sense of peace and purpose. She had found a home, a place where she belonged. As the snow fell gently, covering the land in a blanket of white, Margaret sat by the fire, her heart filled with hope. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, but she felt ready to face them. Together with Naiche and her children, she looked to the future with optimism. The community had accepted her, and she had found her place among them. Margaret knew she had made the right choice, embracing this new life with open arms. She had discovered strength and resilience within herself, nurtured by love and partnership. Margaret closed her eyes, listening to the crackle of the fire and the soft breathing of her children. She felt a sense of contentment, knowing they were safe and loved. Together, they had created a life rich with meaning and joy, a life she was grateful for every day. The winter months passed slowly, each day bringing its own challenges. The cold was relentless, and the forest seemed to be in a deep sleep. Margaret and Naiche, along with the rest of the community, worked hard to ensure everyone had enough food and warmth. The sense of unity was strong, and Margaret felt grateful for the support around her. But as the snow began to melt and the days grew longer, unexpected challenges arose. Illness swept through the camp, affecting both young and old. Margaret watched with concern as her children developed fevers, their small bodies fighting against the sickness. She felt a knot of fear in her stomach but knew she had to remain calm. Naiche and Margaret did their best to care for the children. They used the herbs and remedies they had learned about, hoping to ease the symptoms. The community pulled together, sharing what they had and supporting each other through the difficult time. Margaret was touched by their kindness, their willingness to help even when they themselves were struggling. Despite their efforts, the illness lingered, testing Margaret's resolve. She felt exhausted, her worry for her children constant. But she also felt a deep sense of determination. She had faced challenges before, and she knew she had the strength to face this one too. The community's healer, an elderly woman with deep knowledge of plants and medicine, visited frequently. She offered guidance and reassurance, her presence a comfort to Margaret. The healer's calm demeanor and gentle hands brought a sense of hope to the camp. Margaret spent long nights sitting by the children's bedside, her heart aching with worry. She whispered stories to them, her voice soft and soothing. She spoke of better days, of the adventures they would have when they were well again. Her words were a promise, a reminder that this too would pass. Slowly, the children began to recover. Their fevers broke, and their energy returned bit by bit. Margaret felt a wave of relief wash over her, a weight lifting from her shoulders. She held them close, grateful for their resilience and strength. But as the children recovered, another challenge emerged. Tensions arose within the community, sparked by disagreements over resources and responsibilities. The stress of the long winter and the illness had taken its toll, and tempers flared. Margaret watched as arguments broke out, her heart heavy with concern. She understood the stress everyone was under, but she also knew the importance of unity. She felt a responsibility to help mend the rifts, to bring the community back together. Margaret and Naiche talked late into the night, discussing ways to ease the tensions. They knew they needed to find a solution, to remind everyone of the strength they had when they worked together. Margaret felt a sense of urgency, knowing how important it was to restore harmony. The next day, Margaret called a meeting around the central fire. She spoke from her heart, her words simple but sincere. She reminded everyone of the challenges they had faced together, of the strength and support they had shown one another. She spoke of the bonds they had formed, of the friendships that had grown. Margaret's words were a plea for unity, a reminder of the power they had when they stood together. She saw heads nodding, expressions softening as her words sank in. Naiche spoke next, his voice calm and steady. He echoed Margaret's sentiments, speaking of the importance of community and cooperation. He reminded them of the values they held dear, of the traditions that had guided them for generations. The meeting ended with a renewed sense of purpose. The community began to work together again, finding solutions to the problems they faced. Margaret felt a sense of relief, knowing they had taken an important step towards healing. As spring approached, the forest came alive once more. The snow melted, revealing the rich earth beneath. Birds returned, their songs a welcome sound. Margaret felt a sense of renewal, a hope for the future. The children were healthy and strong, eager to explore the world around them. Margaret watched them with pride, knowing they had overcome so much. She felt a deep gratitude for the life they had built, for the family and community they had become. Margaret often reflected on the challenges they had faced. She knew there would be more in the future, but she felt ready to meet them. She had learned the importance of resilience, of trusting in the strength of the people around her. With Naiche by her side, Margaret felt a sense of peace. They had created a life filled with love and purpose, a life she was grateful for every day. Together, they looked to the future with hope, ready to face whatever came their way. The forest, once a place of fear, had become their sanctuary. Margaret knew they were where they were meant to be, surrounded by people who cared for each other. The lessons they had learned, the bonds they had forged, would guide them through any challenge. Margaret sat by the fire, her heart filled with gratitude. She watched the flames dance, their light a symbol of the warmth and love that surrounded her. She knew they were more than a community, they were a family, and together they could overcome anything. The days grew longer as spring settled in, bringing warmth and renewal to the forest. Margaret felt a sense of optimism as she watched the world around her come back to life. The community was thriving, working together to prepare for the busy seasons ahead. The air was filled with the sounds of laughter and work, a testament to their resilience and unity. One morning, while Margaret was tending to the small garden she had started, a figure emerged from the trees. At first, she thought it was Naiche returning from hunting, but as the figure came closer, she realized it was someone else. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized the person, an old acquaintance from her past. The man approached, his expression one of surprise and curiosity. Margaret greeted him cautiously, unsure of his intentions. His presence stirred memories she had tucked away, memories of her life before the wilderness and the community she now called home. His name was Thomas, a man she had known from the settlement where she and her late husband had lived before joining the pioneers. Thomas had been a friend, someone who had shared their dreams of a new life in the West. But seeing him now, Margaret felt a mix of emotions: nostalgia, confusion, and a hint of apprehension. Thomas explained that he had been traveling, searching for a place to settle. He had heard of the community in the forest and decided to see it for himself. Margaret listened, her mind racing with questions. She wondered what had happened to the others from their past, if they had found the peace they sought. As they talked, Thomas asked about her life in the forest, about Naiche and the children. Margaret shared her story, her voice steady but filled with emotion. She spoke of the hardships and the joys, the lessons she had learned and the new family she had found. Thomas listened intently, his expression thoughtful. But as the conversation continued, Margaret sensed another motive behind Thomas's visit. He spoke of the opportunities beyond the forest, of the towns and settlements growing in the West. He questioned her decision to stay in the forest, hinting at the life she had left behind. Margaret felt a flicker of doubt, a small voice in her mind questioning her choices. She had worked hard to build this life, to find happiness and purpose. But Thomas's words stirred uncertainties she thought she had overcome. She knew she had to confront these feelings, to reaffirm her commitment to the life she had chosen. That evening, Margaret sat with Naiche by the fire, the warmth a comfort against the cool night air. She shared her encounter with Thomas, her voice calm but filled with the weight of her thoughts. Naiche listened, his expression gentle and understanding. Margaret spoke of the memories Thomas had awakened, of the doubts he had stirred. She questioned her decisions, wondering if she had chosen the right path. Naiche remained silent, giving her space to express her feelings. His presence was a steady comfort, grounding her in the present. After a moment, Naiche spoke, his words simple but profound. He reminded Margaret of the strength she had found, of the family and community they had built together. He spoke of the bonds they had formed, of the happiness they had discovered. Margaret felt a sense of clarity, a realization that her doubts were shadows of the past. Margaret knew she needed to confront her past, to find closure and peace. She decided to talk to Thomas once more, to share her thoughts and reaffirm her commitment to her new life. She found him the next day, sitting by the stream that ran through the camp. As they talked, Margaret spoke from her heart. She thanked Thomas for reminding her of her past, for helping her see how far she had come. But she also explained why she had chosen this life, why she had embraced the forest and the community within it. Margaret's voice was steady, filled with conviction. She spoke of the love and purpose she had found, of the strength and resilience she had discovered. She knew the life she had chosen was the right one for her and her children. Thomas listened, his expression softening. He nodded, understanding the depth of her words. He wished her well, expressing his hope that she would find happiness in the life she had chosen. Margaret felt a sense of relief, knowing she had faced her doubts and found clarity. As Thomas prepared to leave, Margaret felt a sense of peace. She knew her past would always be a part of her, but it no longer held her back. She had found closure, a sense of acceptance and gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. Margaret returned to the camp, her heart light with the knowledge that she had made the right choice. She found Naiche and the children, their presence a reminder of all she had gained. Together, they watched the sun set, its warm glow a symbol of the future they would face together. Margaret felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life they had built, for the family and community that surrounded her. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, but she felt ready to face them. With Naiche and her children by her side, she looked to the future with hope and confidence. The forest, once a place of uncertainty and fear, had become her sanctuary. Margaret knew she was where she was meant to be, surrounded by love and purpose. Together, they would continue to build a life rich with meaning and joy, a life she cherished every day. With her past reconciled and her path clear, Margaret turned her focus to strengthening the bonds between her past and present. She realized that while the forest had given her a new life, her past experiences were still part of her identity. She wanted to create a bridge between the two, blending the best of both worlds. Margaret began by sharing more of her culture with the community. She introduced small traditions from her past, simple things like songs and stories from her childhood. The women and children gathered around, eager to learn. Margaret's voice filled the air, weaving tales of her heritage with warmth and joy. The community embraced these new traditions, finding joy in the exchange. The songs became part of their gatherings, blending harmoniously with their own music. Margaret felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing she was contributing to the rich tapestry of their shared life. Inspired by this exchange, Margaret decided to initiate a project that would bring everyone together. She proposed creating a small garden where they could grow herbs and vegetables. It would be a place of learning and cooperation, where everyone could contribute and benefit from the harvest. Naiche supported her idea, and together they presented it to the community. The response was enthusiastic, and soon plans were underway. The garden would be a symbol of their unity, a testament to their ability to work together for a common purpose. Margaret and Naiche led the efforts, organizing teams to clear the land and gather supplies. The children helped eagerly, their excitement infectious. James and Lucy took on the task of planting seeds, while Sam assisted with watering. The community worked side by side, each person bringing their own skills and knowledge. As the garden took shape, Margaret felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. She watched as the first sprouts pushed through the soil, a promise of the bounty to come. The garden became a focal point for the community, a place where people gathered to work and share stories. Margaret saw the garden as a metaphor for their lives. Each seed planted was a step towards the future, a commitment to growth and resilience. The garden reflected the unity and strength of their community, the bonds they had forged through shared experiences. The project brought everyone closer together, strengthening relationships and fostering a sense of belonging. Margaret saw how the garden bridged the gap between her past and present, blending the traditions and values of both her old and new lives. As the weeks passed, the garden flourished. The herbs grew fragrant, and the vegetables ripened under the sun. The community celebrated the harvest with a gathering, sharing a meal made from the fruits of their labor. Margaret felt a deep sense of gratitude, knowing she had contributed to something meaningful. The garden was more than a source of food. It was a symbol of hope and collaboration. It represented the power of coming together, of creating something beautiful from the earth. Margaret felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing she was part of something larger than herself. Margaret's efforts to blend her past and present extended beyond the garden. She reached out to the community, seeking to learn more about their customs and traditions. She participated in their ceremonies, eager to understand their significance and meaning. The community welcomed her curiosity, sharing their knowledge and stories. Margaret felt honored to be included, to be part of their rich history and culture. She learned about their dances and songs, their ways of celebrating the seasons and honoring their ancestors. Margaret's openness and willingness to learn endeared her to the community. They saw her as one of their own, someone who respected their way of life and valued their traditions. Margaret felt a deep sense of belonging, knowing she had found a home among these people. Her efforts to bridge the gap between her past and present also brought her closer to Naiche. They shared their dreams for the future, their hopes for the children and the community. Margaret felt a deep connection with him, a partnership built on mutual respect and love. Together, they worked to create a life filled with meaning and purpose. They supported each other through challenges, celebrating their successes and learning from their failures. Margaret knew she could face anything with Naiche by her side, their bond a source of strength and comfort. As the seasons changed, Margaret reflected on her journey. She thought of the challenges she had overcome, the lessons she had learned. She felt a sense of peace, knowing she had found a way to honor her past while embracing her present. The garden stood as a testament to their unity, a symbol of the life they had created together. Margaret knew there would be more challenges ahead, but she felt ready to face them. With Naiche and the community by her side, she looked to the future with hope and optimism. Margaret had found a way to blend her past and present, creating a new path filled with promise and possibility. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life they had built, for the love and support that surrounded her. Together, they would continue to grow and thrive, building a future filled with joy and purpose. The days grew warmer as summer settled over the forest. The garden flourished, providing a bounty of fresh vegetables and herbs. The community thrived, their bonds strengthened by shared work and celebrations. Margaret felt a deep sense of contentment, knowing she had found a place where she truly belonged. But as the sun rose high in the sky one morning, Margaret sensed something was amiss. The air was different, a tension lingering that she couldn't quite place. She noticed Naiche and some of the other men gathered at the edge of the camp, their expressions serious and focused. Margaret approached, her curiosity piqued. Naiche turned to her, his face filled with concern. He explained that there was an external threat, something that could put the entire community at risk. Margaret listened intently, her heart quickening with a mix of fear and determination. A fire had started in the forest, spreading quickly through the dry underbrush. The men had seen the smoke rising in the distance, a dark cloud against the blue sky. Margaret felt a knot of fear in her stomach, knowing the danger that fire posed to their home. Naiche explained that they needed to act quickly to protect the community. The fire could reach them if they didn't take precautions. Margaret nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. She knew they needed to work together, to use their strength and knowledge to face this challenge. Margaret and Naiche gathered the community, explaining the situation and outlining a plan. They would create fire breaks, clearing areas of brush and debris to stop the fire's progress. The community responded with resolve, ready to face the threat head-on. Margaret worked tirelessly alongside Naiche, her determination unwavering. They divided into teams, each group assigned to a different area. Margaret took charge of one team, guiding them as they cleared the land. The work was hard and exhausting, but Margaret felt a sense of purpose driving her forward. The children helped where they could, their small hands eager to contribute. James, Lucy, and Sam moved branches and cleared debris, their faces set with determination. Margaret felt a swell of pride, knowing they were learning the importance of working together in the face of adversity. As the day wore on, the community made progress. The fire breaks began to take shape, a testament to their strength and resilience. Margaret felt a sense of camaraderie as they worked side by side, each person contributing to the effort. But the fire continued to advance, its smoke a constant reminder of the danger. Margaret felt the heat as it drew closer, a reminder of the urgency of their task. She pushed herself harder, her resolve growing stronger with each passing moment. Naiche worked tirelessly, his leadership a source of inspiration for the community. Margaret watched him with admiration, knowing they were lucky to have him guiding them through this challenge. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for his presence, for the strength and wisdom he provided. As night fell, the community gathered around the central fire, their faces weary but determined. They shared stories and encouragement, bolstering each other's spirits. Margaret felt a sense of unity, knowing they were stronger together. The next day dawned with renewed purpose. The community continued their efforts, working tirelessly to protect their home. The fire breaks expanded, creating a barrier between the camp and the advancing flames. Margaret felt a sense of hope, knowing they were making progress. As the sun set on the second day, a light rain began to fall. Margaret looked to the sky, her heart filled with relief. The rain would help slow the fire, giving them the chance they needed to strengthen their defenses. The community rejoiced, their spirits lifted by the unexpected blessing. Margaret felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She knew they had faced a great challenge, but they had done so with courage and determination. Together, they had protected their home, their unity a testament to their strength. In the days that followed, the fire was contained, its threat diminished by their efforts and the rain. The community celebrated their success, knowing they had overcome a significant challenge. Margaret felt a sense of pride, knowing she had contributed to their victory. The experience had strengthened their bonds, reinforcing the importance of unity and cooperation. Margaret felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing they could face any challenge as long as they stood together. As the smoke cleared and the forest began to heal, Margaret reflected on the lessons they had learned. She knew there would be more challenges in the future, but she felt ready to face them. With Naiche and the community by her side, she looked to the future with hope and confidence. Margaret had discovered the power of unity, the strength that came from working together for a common goal. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life they had built, for the love and support that surrounded her. The fire had tested them, but it had also brought them closer together. Margaret knew they were more than a community, they were a family, and together they could overcome anything. With the danger of the fire behind them, the community settled back into their daily routines. The land slowly healed, and the forest began to thrive again. Margaret felt a sense of peace as she watched the world around her return to life. She knew they had overcome a great challenge, and the experience had made them stronger. One quiet evening, Margaret sat by the fire, reflecting on their journey. She thought of the struggles they had faced and the victories they had achieved. The challenges had been many, but each one had taught her something new. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life they had built and the family they had become. As she watched the flames dance, Naiche joined her, his presence a comforting warmth in the cool night air. They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Margaret felt a profound sense of connection with him, a bond that had grown stronger with each shared experience. Margaret turned to Naiche, her heart full of emotion. She spoke softly, expressing her gratitude for his support and guidance. She told him how much she valued their partnership, the strength they found in each other. Naiche listened, his eyes reflecting the same feelings. The fire crackled, filling the silence between them with a gentle warmth. Margaret knew this moment was a turning point, a chance to reflect on how far they had come. She realized that their journey had been more than just survival. It had been about finding a deeper purpose, a sense of belonging and love. Naiche spoke then, his voice steady and calm. He shared his thoughts on their journey, his hopes for the future. He spoke of the family they had created, the community that had become their home. Margaret felt a deep sense of peace as she listened, knowing they shared the same dreams and aspirations. Together, they reflected on the lessons they had learned. They spoke of the importance of resilience, of trusting in the strength of the people around them. Margaret felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing they could face any challenge together. The night deepened, and the stars appeared in the sky, a blanket of light stretching above them. Margaret felt a sense of wonder as she looked up, reminded of the vastness of the world and their place within it. She knew their journey was far from over, but she felt ready to face whatever came next. The children joined them by the fire, their faces alight with curiosity and joy. James, Lucy, and Sam listened as Margaret and Naiche shared stories of their past, tales of adventure and courage. The children's laughter filled the air, a sound that brought warmth to Margaret's heart. Margaret felt a deep sense of pride as she watched her children grow. They had faced challenges with courage and determination, learning important lessons along the way. She knew they were strong, capable of facing whatever life might bring. As the fire burned low, the community gathered around, drawn by the warmth and light. They shared stories and laughter, their bonds strengthened by the experiences they had shared. Margaret felt a sense of belonging, knowing she was part of something greater than herself. The night was filled with the sounds of friendship and love, a testament to the strength of the community. Margaret felt a deep sense of gratitude, knowing she had found her place among these people. She knew they would continue to grow and thrive, building a future filled with hope and purpose. The firelight danced in Margaret's eyes, a reflection of the joy and peace she felt within. She knew their journey had just begun, but she felt ready to face whatever came next. Together with Naiche and her children, she looked to the future with optimism and confidence. Margaret had found love and purpose, a sense of belonging that filled her heart with joy. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, but she felt ready to face them with courage and determination. With Naiche and her family by her side, she looked to the future with hope, knowing they could overcome anything together. As the summer days stretched on, the community continued to thrive under the warm sun. The forest was alive with color and sound, a vibrant backdrop to their daily lives. Margaret felt a deep sense of contentment as she went about her tasks. The garden flourished, and the harvest promised to be bountiful. The community decided to hold a celebration to mark the successful harvest and the unity they had achieved. It would be a time to give thanks for their blessings and to strengthen the bonds that held them together. Margaret felt a thrill of excitement as preparations began, eager to contribute to the festivities. Margaret and the other women gathered to plan the meal, their laughter and chatter filling the air. They decided on a feast that would showcase the fruits of their labor, a meal that celebrated both their traditions and the new customs they had embraced. Margaret felt a sense of pride as she helped prepare the dishes, knowing the food represented their hard work and cooperation. The children were equally excited, their energy infectious as they helped with decorations. James, Lucy, and Sam worked alongside their friends, gathering colorful leaves and flowers to adorn the central gathering area. Margaret watched them with a smile, her heart full of love and pride. Naiche and the other men prepared the area for the celebration, setting up spaces for dancing and music. The community came together, each person contributing their skills and time. Margaret felt a deep sense of gratitude for the unity they shared, knowing it was a strength that would carry them through any challenge. As the day of the celebration arrived, the community gathered with anticipation. The air was filled with the delicious aromas of the feast, and the area was alive with color and life. Margaret felt a sense of joy as she looked around, knowing they had created something special. The celebration began with a meal, the community gathering to share the food they had prepared together. Margaret watched as the children laughed and played, their faces alight with happiness. She knew this was more than just a meal. It was a symbol of their unity and resilience. As the sun set, the music began, filling the air with melodies that spoke of tradition and togetherness. Margaret joined Naiche in the dance, their movements a reflection of the harmony they had found. The community danced and sang, their joy a testament to the strength of their bonds. Margaret felt a deep sense of belonging as she moved to the music. She knew she was part of something greater than herself, part of a family that had embraced her and her children. Her heart swelled with gratitude for the love and support they had found. Throughout the evening, Margaret took moments to reflect on their journey. She thought of the challenges they had faced, the lessons they had learned. She knew they had grown stronger together, each experience bringing them closer as a community. James, Lucy, and Sam joined the dance, their laughter a joyful melody that filled the air. Margaret watched them with pride, knowing they were growing up in a world filled with love and support. She felt a deep sense of happiness, knowing they were surrounded by people who cared for them. As the night deepened, the music softened, and the community gathered around the central fire. Margaret felt a sense of peace as she sat with Naiche and the children, the warmth of the fire a comforting presence in the cool night air. The elder of the community spoke, her voice steady and warm. She expressed gratitude for the harvest, for the unity they had achieved. Her words were a reminder of the strength they found in each other, the power of working together for a common goal. Margaret listened, her heart full of appreciation for the life they had built. She knew they would face more challenges, but she felt ready to meet them with courage and determination. The community was strong, their bonds forged through shared experiences and mutual support. As the fire crackled and the stars twinkled above, Margaret felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had found a home, a place where she belonged. With Naiche and her children by her side, she looked to the future with hope and confidence. The celebration was a testament to their journey, a reflection of the love and unity they had found. Margaret knew they would continue to grow and thrive, building a life filled with meaning and joy. Together, they were more than just a community. They were a family, and they could overcome anything. The days after the celebration were filled with a sense of peace and fulfillment. The community was strong, and the bonds between its members were deeper than ever. Margaret felt a profound sense of gratitude for the life they had built. She knew this strength came from the lessons they had learned, and she was eager to pass this wisdom to the next generation. Margaret and Naiche took time each day to teach their children about their combined heritage. They wanted James, Lucy, and Sam to grow up understanding the values and traditions of both their cultures. It was important to them that their children respected and cherished this rich blend of identities. One sunny afternoon, Margaret gathered her children under the shade of a large tree. The leaves whispered above them, creating a comforting rhythm. She started by telling them stories from her childhood, tales of her family and the traditions they had honored. Her voice was soft but filled with emotion, each story a thread that connected the past to the present. James listened intently, his young mind absorbing every detail. He was eager to learn about his mother's past, the history that was now part of his own identity. Margaret watched him with pride, knowing he would carry these stories forward. Lucy, with her curious nature, asked questions about the tales. She wanted to know more about the people and places her mother spoke of. Margaret answered each question with patience, her heart swelling with love for her inquisitive daughter. Sam, the youngest, was fascinated by the stories and how they linked him to a world beyond the forest. His eyes were wide with wonder as he listened, feeling the magic of the past come alive through his mother's words. Naiche joined them, bringing his own stories to the circle. He spoke of his ancestors, their wisdom, and their connection to the land. His words painted vivid pictures of the values that had guided his people for generations. The children listened, captivated by the tales of bravery and honor. Margaret felt a deep sense of fulfillment as she watched her children. They were learning about respect, strength, and understanding, values that would guide them throughout their lives. She knew these lessons were a gift, a legacy that would shape their future. Together, Margaret and Naiche taught their children practical skills too. They showed them how to gather food and recognize the signs of the changing seasons. The children learned to read the land, to understand its rhythms and cycles. These skills were essential, a way to live in harmony with the world around them. James took to these lessons with enthusiasm, eager to apply what he learned. He followed Naiche closely, watching how he moved through the forest with ease and confidence. Margaret saw the admiration in James's eyes and felt a sense of pride in the young man he was becoming. Lucy enjoyed learning about the plants and herbs, understanding their uses and importance. She spent time with the women of the community, soaking up their knowledge. Margaret knew Lucy would grow into a wise and capable woman, her heart filled with compassion and strength. Sam, with his boundless curiosity, explored the forest with a sense of wonder. He was a sponge, absorbing everything he saw and heard. Margaret watched him with a smile, knowing he was growing up in a world rich with possibility and promise. As the days turned into weeks, Margaret felt a sense of peace. She knew they were preparing their children well, giving them the tools they needed to thrive. The lessons they shared were more than just knowledge. They were a foundation of love and support. Margaret often reflected on their journey, the path that had led them here. She thought of the challenges they had faced, the lessons they had learned. She knew they had grown stronger with each experience, their bonds forged through shared trials and triumphs. The community was a source of strength, a network of support and friendship. Margaret felt grateful for the people who had embraced her and her family, who had taught her the value of unity and cooperation. She knew they would face more challenges, but she felt ready to meet them with courage and determination. As the sun set on another day, Margaret sat with Naiche and the children by the fire. The warmth of the flames was comforting, a reminder of the love and support that surrounded them. Margaret felt a deep sense of gratitude, knowing they had found a home in each other and in the community. She looked at her children, their faces alight with the glow of the fire. They were the future, a promise of the life they had built together. Margaret felt a sense of hope as she watched them, knowing they would carry forward the lessons and values they had learned. With Naiche by her side, Margaret knew they could face anything. Together, they had created a life filled with meaning and joy, a life she was grateful for every day. The future was bright, filled with promise and possibility, and Margaret felt ready to embrace it with open arms. The seasons continued to change, bringing new colors and life to the forest. Margaret watched as the leaves turned golden, then fell gently to the ground. The air was crisp, filled with the promise of a new beginning. Margaret felt a deep sense of peace as she walked through the forest, the ground soft beneath her feet. Margaret often took these walks to reflect on her journey. She thought of the path that had led her here, the challenges she had faced, and the love she had found. Her heart was full of gratitude for the life she had built with Naiche and their children. As she walked, Margaret thought about the future. She knew they had faced many trials, but each one had made them stronger. She felt ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing they had the strength and unity to overcome anything. Margaret returned to the camp, where Naiche and the children were busy with their daily tasks. The community was alive with activity, a testament to their resilience and unity. Margaret felt a deep sense of belonging, knowing she was part of something greater than herself. The children were growing quickly, their laughter a constant presence in the camp. James was becoming more independent, eager to take on new responsibilities. Margaret watched him with pride, knowing he was growing into a strong and capable young man. Lucy was blossoming, her curiosity and kindness shining through in everything she did. She had become an integral part of the community, her gentle nature endearing her to everyone. Margaret knew Lucy would grow into a wise and compassionate woman, her heart filled with love and understanding. Sam, the youngest, was full of energy and wonder. He explored the forest with a sense of adventure, his eyes wide with curiosity. Margaret watched him with a smile, knowing he was growing up in a world rich with possibility and promise. Margaret and Naiche worked together, teaching their children the values and skills they would need. They shared their knowledge and wisdom, guiding them with love and patience. Margaret felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing they were preparing their children well for the future. One evening, as the sun set over the forest, the community gathered to celebrate the harvest. Margaret felt a sense of joy as she looked around, knowing they had created something special. The air was filled with laughter and music, a testament to the strength of their bonds. Margaret stood with Naiche, their hands intertwined. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for his presence in her life, for the love and support he had given her. Together, they had built a life rich with meaning and purpose. As the celebration continued, Margaret took a moment to reflect on their journey. She thought of the challenges they had faced and the lessons they had learned. She knew they had grown stronger with each experience, their bonds forged through shared trials and triumphs. Margaret felt a deep sense of peace as she watched her children dance and laugh with their friends. They were the future, a promise of the life they had built together. Margaret knew they would carry forward the lessons and values they had learned, creating a bright and hopeful future. As the night deepened, Margaret felt a sense of contentment settle over her. She knew their journey was far from over, but she felt ready to face whatever came next. With Naiche and her children by her side, She looked to the future with hope and confidence. Margaret had found love and purpose, a sense of belonging that filled her heart with joy. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, but she felt ready to face them with courage and determination. Together with Naiche and her family, she looked to the future, knowing they could overcome anything. The forest, once a place of uncertainty and fear, had become their sanctuary. Margaret knew they were where they were meant to be, surrounded by love and purpose. Together, they would continue to grow and thrive, building a life filled with meaning and joy. As the fire crackled and the stars twinkled above, Margaret felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had found a home, a place where she belonged. With Naiche and her children by her side, she looked to the future with optimism, ready to embrace whatever came next. If you loved this story, like the video and subscribe.